So hey, thanks for having me here, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be talking a little bit about kind of the state of artificial intelligence in business. And I feared I'd be somewhat out of place here because not so much because I'm the only American guy, but maybe because I'm the only one that doesn't write software for a living to some degree. So our work is focused on kind of an executive audience who's looking to leverage artificial intelligence. But I think it's kind of an important message for the people that are actually building that technology to understand some of that as well. So the real business use cases are what we study on a regular basis. And it's interesting to see where AI is kind of making traction in business and where it's kind of getting held up. So I figured that would be pretty relevant too. So maybe I would fit in with that. But the one area where I really knew I wouldn't fit in is when everybody has WhatsApp. I'm like the only guy here that doesn't have WhatsApp for some reason. In America, like a lot of people just like text messages like, oh man, I'm going to be the weirdo who's never used WhatsApp before. So anyway, state of AI in industry is going to be the overall topic. Again, this is kind of from the business use case perspective of kind of where AI is making its way into business today. And just for some context, very little of what I'm going to talk about is from my own brilliance in this presentation. Most of what we do involves market research and talking to a lot of executives. So we walk into Facebook headquarters, we walk into Airbnb headquarters, we walk into Netflix and all the other big Silicon Valley folks where I'm based, and then also go around the world. So I was here for the last 10 days. We've talked to people from Amazon and from InMobi and a lot of the cool companies here as well. So a lot of the insights I'll be talking about are really just kind of condensed versions of what business leaders in the AI domain at all kinds of cool companies are saying. So certainly don't want to construe this as if it's my great insights. I just have the fortunate position to be able to congeal some of the thoughts from people that we speak to. Again, we're a market research and media firm about the business applications of AI. And we have readers all over the world. Interestingly enough, we have more readers in Bangalore than any other city in the world. So people ask like, oh, what brought you to Bangalore? Like, hey, yeah, I know, right? But, all right, we'll clap it up for Bangalore. That's cool. I'm cool with that. I like it. People like, oh, why do you want to go to Bangalore? Like, are you going on like a vacation in Asia? Are you like, looking for cheap labor or something? I'm like, nope, that's where all my readers are. So I got to go. So that really put Bangalore on the map. Like 18 months ago, I saw Bengaluru on Google Maps as like, and the dot for traffic size was like growing huge like every week. I was like, what is this place? So that's essentially what brings me here. So we have a lot of readers in India. Most of our readers in the States are in the cities you'd expect. New York City, San Francisco, Boston, Los Angeles. A little bit of Chicago, they're a little bit behind these days, but I'm sure they'll catch up at some point. Anyway, so here's kind of an outline of what I'll go into. I want to leave plenty of room for just Q&A stuff about business applications. I'm not going to be able to like riff about Scala and stuff with you guys, but I can definitely talk about where AI is going from kind of a business and use case perspective. So we'll talk first about the state of AI in enterprise. Where is it making its way into business? Where is it not? Where is it kind of mattering? Where is it not? And some of the challenges that are going on there. Talk a little bit about sort of the decision to adopt AI or not. You guys will probably see, in the next 5 years, as plenty of companies in San Francisco as well, the business leaders in these organizations are thinking about, where do we use it? What do we want to build? Where do we want to apply this? And you guys are part of that decision as kind of technical folks. And so kind of thinking about when to and when not to seriously consider AI is an important thing on the minds of almost all execs where I am, and I imagine it's the same here. So we'll talk a bit about kind of the do's and don'ts potentially there. And the real ROI of this talk, I think, what I hope is going to be like the real value of the presentation is at the end of this talk, I'm going to try to present the way that we think about what to get out of your attention stream for AI and what to keep. If you're like me, you probably see in Twitter and everything else, like everything is AI now, like AI revolutionized this, like game changer that. And those are really crappy words. And so we want to get rid of the hype as much as possible. And so as an analyst firm, we have to have like a pretty quick way of figuring out what things are relevant and what things aren't when it comes to AI in my business. So does this matter to me or not? That decision should be pretty fast. And so there's a pretty brief way that we like to think through that. I'll go over that very shortly at the end of the presentation. I hope it'll be useful for you guys too. So that's what I thought could be kind of a takeaway. So why machine learning matters? This is kind of old hat news for most of you guys. Artificial intelligence isn't totally new. We had AI in the 80s and in the 90s. The difference now is that all of the largest and most powerful companies in the world are indeed predicated on artificial intelligence. It's not kind of like a sidebar thing. Like you actually don't have Amazon without AI. You actually don't have Google without AI. And so machine learning is kind of becoming enough of a big deal for all businesses to at least consider how it'll affect the future of their industry. And I think certainly in the software world, there's no doubt about AI kind of making a big stamp there. In terms of where AI is in the enterprise, I find that this often comes as a surprise, but to be really clear about it, it's mostly kind of pilots and testing stuff. So there's a lot of wacky headlines on the Twitters and the Facebooks of the world of like, XYZ company revolutionizes self-driving trucks. Like, that's the headline. But like, what happened? Like, 2 guys in Israel raised like $1 million. Like, self-driving trucks are totally not revolutionized because 2 guys in Israel raised. Like, maybe they will at some point, right? But the headlines are kind of preempting impact. But the actual boots on the ground work almost all the time is kind of very early on, very, very kind of struggling and toiling to make an initial difference. So it's really, AI is kind of tinkering in the various application areas where it's being leveraged. And when you look at sort of lists of AI companies, this is something we're forced to do, whether I want to or not. I have to look at thousands of companies every month. And if we go into healthcare, or we go into marketing, or we go into name an industry, finance, whatever, you'll see a big list of AI fintech companies, big list of AI medical diagnostic companies. Really, if you kind of do a little bit of digging into those companies, out of maybe 100 of them, there's maybe a third of them that have the actual potential and smarts to maybe be doing AI. So the easiest low-hanging fruit, if somebody says they do AI, is you go to LinkedIn, you find the people running the damn company, and you see if any of them went to school for that. And if like none of them did, that's usually a sort of among the worst signs you can have. And the other thing is, do they have marquee experience in AI at marquee companies? Amazon's, Facebook's, Google's, IBM's, whatever. Like, did they work hands-on with AI and ML? If it's a startup that's saying that their value prop is predicated on AI, but nobody on the leadership team, either in academia or in previous work, has been really deep in artificial intelligence, it's probably legitimate nonsense. And so these companies all get listed together, but it's really not the case. So you might think like, oh, there's all these AI companies revolutionizing my industry. It's like, super probably not, actually. So that's kind of an important fun fact. So that's about a third of them. Now let's slice it again. So we say how many of them have a chance of doing something or actually doing something. So maybe a third of those companies actually have some kind of a pilot project that maybe not definitively, but maybe is going to have promise. So if it's a healthcare firm, maybe they've partnered with a hospital and they're actually kind of trying something out with patients or trying something out with data. They have a pilot that almost seems as though something could be there. Doesn't mean they're break even, doesn't mean they're making money, doesn't mean they've made a single sale, doesn't mean it's super self-evident it's going to be useful. It means maybe it'll be useful. That's a third of them. So out of 100 companies, you maybe have 10 who you could say like, they might do some stuff. So that's kind of where it is. Now, that's unfortunate for us because it really looks like, and people really expect that there's a good jillion of these companies. I mean, certainly there are more and more, and there's more and more people being trained on this stuff and more of these online learning courses, and people are getting good at AI, but the traction is just nowhere near what the hype is. And the companies in this space are super nowhere near what they're often listed as. Here's ML and marketing companies. No. But it takes a level of digging to actually get there. So just really want to be clear about this. I'm not a pessimist about AI by any means. I mean, my entire business is predicated on covering the business impacts and applications of this. But we have to sift through a lot of garbage. And it's important to know that that's actually the case in many circumstances. So really kind of lean away from buzzwords. Again, like a rule of thumb, like I said, is like, oh, cool. Like, we're an AI company in Industry X. Go to LinkedIn. Look at the people running the business. Like, if they don't meet the marquee business criteria of working on AI or the hardcore academic criteria of working on AI, they're probably actually just not doing it. So important things to bear in mind. In terms of sort of mishaps of AI kind of making its way into industry. So there's a lot of executives who are talking to their technical teams like yourselves, talking to their board, and they're asking a question, which is, how do we use AI? What can we do with AI? And when we talk to people who are really well grounded in artificial intelligence, have a firm background there, have implemented these technologies at big companies, whether, again, it be the Amazons or whoever else, they'll tell us pretty firmly that that's the wrong question to ask. But where can we use AI? Like, where do we plug in AI? Like, it's a thing that you just kind of like plug into problems and like have fun and it'll like automate and do all this cool stuff. That's sort of the wrong way to think about it. And then in fact, that leads to what are often called toy applications. So again, I don't write the code for this stuff, but I do talk to a lot of the people that sell it. So we talk to people that sell AI to hospitals, sell AI to banks, sell AI to you name it. This is the consultants and it's the vendor companies that are actually offering these services. All of them complain about the idea of toy applications. So the hype around AI has meant that a lot of business people are asking, where can we use AI? Which is a bit of a misguided question. We'll get to kind of maybe a better way of thinking about that. And what it leads to is people who just want to sort of see if they can do something with artificial intelligence. So some guy in IT somewhere, some guy in marketing somewhere will bring in a consultant, bring in a vendor company, and they'll really be excited about the technology, just excited about the tool, and that's why they're starting some kind of an engagement. But the problem with these toy projects is that often they aren't thought out in enough of a long-term way where they're really going to make some kind of serious business impact, and often the business doesn't really have the relevant expertise in-house to kind of do much with AI. And so almost always when questions start with, where can we use AI, these projects get cut short. So the vendor companies who, again, sell to hospitals, sell to banks, the people that are real excited about the tool and maybe even pay a little bit of a down payment and maybe even start with them, 2 months later, somebody higher up above that person will be like, what are we doing with these resources? Like, what are we doing with these people? Like, who decided on this project? Like, this isn't even really going to make a huge difference when it's done. And so they cut it. And so whoever was the champion of, that starting that toy application kind of ends up being more of a fool than a champion. And there's a bunch of this. And so the vendor companies all know that this is happening right now. And so sometimes they'll take the deal because money is money, but they know, like, well, we've only got so many months with these guys before somebody comes in and says, we can't really use you guys right now, and cuts it. So again, very important to understand that that's a bit of the dynamic. The thought is just excitement around the tool, that the people selling this stuff know that that's the deal. Sometimes they'll still take the deal, but they know that those are floppy. And they know that the people that decide on AI the right way, which we'll talk about, are going to be more robust long-term clients. Very few people will talk about this because they got to take the money, but it really is the case in many, many circumstances. So we'll talk about kind of the biggest challenges of bringing AI into existing businesses. I'm sure all of us in the room will sort of see this hitting the ground in our companies in the next half a decade, whether we want to or not. But we do our best to talk to as many people as possible who see this now. Again, big firms and startups, sort of what's making it challenging for AI to make its way into business? Why don't all these manufacturing plants have tons of AI applications for predicting, uptime of machines or whatever? Why don't all these banks have their customer service like automated with chatbots and stuff like that? What's making it so damn hard? And there's a couple sort of key points here. Hundreds and hundreds of interviews. This is sort of what I think is most important from what the smart folks have to say. One of them is having machine learning talent in place is really, really challenging. So, where I am in Silicon Valley, Google will pay people out of college, like $200,000 and like give them a milkshake and like cut their hair and like clean their car when they're at work. And like very few people can compete with that. Like I pay pretty well. But I don't give anybody free haircuts or milkshakes. So it's like there's a certain level of there's like the milkshake haircut level is like a super duper far out level. And whether I go to Georgia and I talk to people at Georgia Tech, I go to MIT, I go wherever, the people with a master's or PhD degrees in sort of data science related fields kind of go to one place because I mean, who wants to pay for a haircut? Or more realistically speaking, like $250,000 a year, a couple years into working is like, it's a good amount of dough. It's like raw. It's like solid cash. So this is exceptionally competitive. Ungodly competitive in certain domains, in certain fields, and it's a serious challenge. And the competition here is quite rabid. The other thing is that relying on consultants is not really possible. So to say like, okay, well, we may not have machine learning people full time, but certainly we could integrate AI in an inherent and implicit deep way into our company simply by paying a consulting firm. Ooh, no. So super no. Like that's not a good thing. Consultancies can work well to sort of not just help to integrate technologies, but hopefully help to upskill teams. So there are really smart academic AI people who do this stuff with all kinds of companies, but they can't bake in the inherent knowledge that a team is going to need to grow it and to integrate it and to really leverage it and use it. The best they can do is work with the technical folks and work with the business folks to understand it, to know how it's going to have to work in the long time, and to pass those skills along. However, as a consultant, you kind of get to pick whether you want to give them that secret sauce early or late, right? Like if you kind of want to keep them around for another year, you might be like, jeepers, this stuff's complicated. I'll have to be seeing you, every week for years to come, right? It's like they'll get to gauge when they want to hand over the reins. And so that's dangerous. This is like, even in the States, almost everybody says no. But does anybody know Machiavelli's The Prince? Anybody ever read that in college? Anybody know who Machiavelli is? One guy, two people know who Machiavelli is. Long story. So, political writer in like medieval Italy, more or less, wrote a book called The Prince. Super eminent book in terms of kind of the dynamics of power. There's a whole chapter. There's multiple chapters and references that talk about the reliance on auxiliary troops. So there's these chapters about like if you win a battle because of troops that you've paid, like mercenary troops. There's like all these terrible things that usually happen to you, and almost all of them apply to consultants doing AI for your company. So I apologize, a literary reference doesn't click, but if you do want to read it, I think you'll enjoy it. So that's problem numero uno. It is argued that that's not even actually the biggest problem, though. And this is a relatively large problem. I think as more MOOCs come out, these online courses, these things will begin to be solved. It's actually seen by many people that it's not the main problem. The main problem is that there's no inherent structures in place in existing businesses to kind of deal with AI and the way AI gets done. I'll explain sort of roughly what I mean. And again, this is from the mouths of people that go into the big banks and go into the hospitals or have come out of IBM or whatever, and who are frustrated with what it's like to try to bring this into an existing business. There's a number of things about AI that are quite different. One of which is there's usually pretty lengthy R&D. So like to get all the data together and to treat the data in a certain way and clean the data in a certain way, you may not need that for everything you ever do in IT, but for AI, you often do. And that upfront work is often months and months of time, incredibly long periods of time, and real changes to the way data is managed. It can't just, well, let's just plug it in and try to test it. Well, you kind of can't. We really need to alter the way that things are functioning. And in large existing businesses, there's a way we do stuff, at an old company. And so it's extremely challenging to often handle that. The other big issue here is that data science sort of speaks a bit of a different language in some respect. And there's a common phenomena that we hear about with, let's say, older companies, like 100-year-old companies, 60-year-old companies, big firms who have the budget. Like, they can go pay for a lot of these dudes. They might not do milkshakes, but they get close enough to milkshake level where they can hire a room of ML people. But the problem is they hire a room of ML people, and then nobody else in the business knows, like, what stuff do we hand them? Like, when we see like a cool tweet, like, do we tell them to build something? Like when we want to automate something, is that when we talk to them? Like, the business leadership doesn't quite know what sorts of problems would machine learning help with. And so these guys and gals who are super smart technically, aren't really being handed interesting problems and aren't even really being handed relevant problems. They've been hired, they're paid well, but there's a lot of thumb twiddling, and there's a lot of like, no, that's a dumb idea. No, that's a dumb idea. No, that's a dumb... And they have too many of those conversations, and that makes them pretty eager to just move to somewhere where people get it. Move to somewhere where AI is pretty well baked in, we're really high tech, the Amazons of the world and whatever else, where I know I'm going to have interesting work every damn day. And so even if you have the money, that problem doesn't get solved. The business leaders knowing what problems to hand these people. There's the other problem as well. That's the main one. There's the other problem as well of knowing how to integrate what these guys produce. So if we have a big old stodgy IT firm, and these guys are pumping out really cool data-related products for customer service or for whatever else, how to integrate that and how to manage sort of a machine learning product that needs to sort of feed itself more data and whatnot, that's different than kind of plug and play IT in other ways. And so what we hand this fancy room of overpaid machine learning guys and how we take whatever they produce, if we ever give them a good enough idea to produce, both of those problems are like over the heads of firms that don't have this modern tech baked in. These are really, really, again, pretty inherent issues with integrating AI into existing businesses. Okay, cool. Lights back up. So there are some people who really think that older school companies are really the best shot they have is maybe acquisitions as opposed to working with vendors, having a bunch of these people who already really own a domain area who they can kind of absorb and eventually get that osmosis going because it's kind of stuck. In terms of criteria for getting some ROI from an artificial intelligence application, this is from some of our own research. All this stuff is in the back of the slide deck. If people want the slides, we can send it along. But insufficient data is a really, really big problem for people kind of not getting enough out of an AI application, being able to pick the right problem and having the right data science talent. When we talk to PhDs, this particular poll was like 35 PhDs in the field. These are like the big things that you'd need to have in place to get something out of AI. Everybody knows that. But again, the problems I talked about in the previous slide are still so inherent that even if you tell your board and you tell all the execs these things, it doesn't necessarily make the problems go away. We'll skip ahead a little bit. It's very challenging to talk widely about where AI is making a difference in business because every business will be different. If you're in pharmaceuticals or you're in banking, it's not like, oh, here's where AI works. That's very challenging. However, there has been some research done on kind of broadly speaking, where is AI being sold and where is AI being integrated into bigger enterprises. And actually, this research is from Tata Consultancy. So I like this a lot. This is from a much larger article on their part, which I got a lot out of. From their perception, and this is sort of backed up by much of what our own research shows, data security stuff is a pretty big deal. A lot of white-collar automation work, like paperwork automation stuff is a big deal. Customer service is a big deal. If you're a big existing enterprise, something potentially customer service, something data security, or some kind of paperwork, white-collar automation is pretty likely to be one of the first areas where machine learning gets applied. Again, it's hard to talk to people from 50 fields and say the same thing, but wide scale, those are areas where it seems to actually be making some traction. People are making sales, making revenue, successfully integrating this stuff into existing businesses. We also find that finance and healthcare are sort of fields that are kind of most ardently pursuing AI. Certainly marketing and media, and there's other domains as well, but big mega fields that are very excited about AI and actually aiming to adopt it. Finance is maybe a little bit faster than healthcare, but these are the two biggest and hungriest fields. We get more traffic. Again, we attract an executive audience interested in AI. We attract more traffic in healthcare than in any other space. Those folks are all kind of aware like healthcare has to change. I think they're all very frustrated with how it is, and so subsequently we see a lot of attention from that domain. And this is actually kind of our own traffic, and the attention that we see is kind of backed up by the trends we see in venture investing. So in terms of industries that are getting a lot of funds raised for AI applications, healthcare and finance are pretty damn high up the list. So we see that kind of backed up subsequently in terms of where people are actually getting their bucks from. So where should AI be used? Again, as mentioned, the whole toy application thing is something that a lot of people who sell AI are just They know it's there. They often don't talk about it. We try to get them to talk about it, but they often don't talk about it. And they're pretty annoyed with how the buying process goes because people are excited just about the tech. The buyers that actually turn into something, the deals regarding integrating AI and selling AI that turn into something, tend to be thought of from the same strategic high level as any other really important decision. So interestingly enough, some of this is not absolutely, rocket science. This is kind of the way a smart decision should be made. Basically, companies think about what are our goals, what are our kind of unique differentiators in the market, and what technology solutions might be best to fit that. And can not have AI high on the list just because it's AI, but just have it as one of the many ways to solve problems. And if it ends up being, by reason, the best way for us to reach our company goals and kind of sustain our advantage in the future, then we can kind of decide on it. What's our talent? What's our resources? Where are we headed as a business? AI gets no special, it's not the golden option that we're all rooting for. It's one of the freaking ways we could solve the damn problem. We would need to solve the problem in a way that's going to make money, that's going to let us continue to feed our employees and make a smart decision. When decisions are made that way, and often AI is kind of it's just not the right thing now, or it's not the right thing for that problem. Seeing that as fine is actually something that the vendor companies who sell this stuff, they're happy to see that. When people can be like, oh yeah, that wouldn't be the best application for us in this area, they know that this isn't somebody just running on hype who's going to integrate some half BS thing, that this is somebody discerning the best decisions based on their company goals, their long-term vision, their current assets and talent, and only when decisions are made from that, not from FOMO, fear of missing out, not from FOMO, that AI can actually potentially make a serious difference in business. So adopt or wait. So we're getting towards the end of the presentation, so we'll be able to get into Q&A in a sec here. We get a lot of questions about this stuff, from businesses who are like, hey, should we should we develop a chatbot? Yes or no? Here's some stuff about our company, whatever the case may be. You would think that as a market research and media firm, I would always tell people like, yeah, rah rah, shish boom bah, you should use AI. But that's really not my stance. My stance is, again, the educated folks in the field see this as a tool that deserves no special attention. It's used when it should be used. If that's done well, given the fact of how few companies really have the requisite talent and data infrastructure to implement ML, most businesses are kind of, not surprisingly hanging here. Even in, like Boston, super techie, cool place. Even in like San Jose or something. Like a lot of when and where we're going to use ML is kind of going to be here. The companies that are going to be doing this, and even many of the companies that are going to be doing this, really early adoption, leading edge kind of stuff, first people to buy from vendors, first people to really crack this problem, that is science. This is like hardcore science. You're going to have mathematicians, you're going to have really high level academic folks. To think that we can get some consultants and create a new use case, to think that like, oh, no other bank in the world has solved this problem, or no other, e-commerce site in the world, even Amazon has solved this problem. Let's go crack that. Maybe you can, but like, you got to raise a lot of money, and you better have a massive team on deck to crack a new problem. Those smart ML people are often going to be working for vendor companies. They're going to have to figure out the kinks selling it dozens and dozens, hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's going to kind of trickle into businesses when it's sort of working. So innovation is inordinately expensive. And so there's some companies, let's say in drug development, where you're big enough, you got enough money, you can pay for whatever talent you need, you have enough computer science sort of chops, and cutting edge ML is the right business decision. You need that to stay competitive. Maybe you're going to be hanging here. Maybe. It's super not a given. A lot of people think like, oh, well, certainly this AI market research guy is going to tell everybody to be here. Really not. Just to be honest, you're not unusual. And even if you're in a high-tech business, there is nothing wrong with hanging in this zone. And I think a lot of people have the feeling that I'm a dinosaur. We're not cracking a new problem with AI. We're not cracking a new problem with ML. You're not a dinosaur. It's fine. I'm in San Francisco. I'm in Boston. Unless you got unless you got mega research, mathematics, super science, milkshake salaries, the whole 9 yards, we're just not really hanging here, and that's cool. We can still grow and make money. But I think even, in the tech cities, there's a real feeling of kind of, maybe you call it envy, whatever you want to call it, that if we're not here, we're a dinosaur. It's much more likely to have folks go broke if they go here for the wrong reasons. So I'm not saying people should lay off the gas and just kind of let AI pass them by. Not even close to saying that. I'm just saying if you make the right and smartest business decision, it's totally cool if AI and ML end up here for you. If you're kind of in with the early and late majority. A lot of people take that as a surprise. Even in a place like San Francisco, I'd say the same damn thing, and I have dozens of times. Yeah, we can kind of skip through a little bit of this stuff. I'll just get into the last slide, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A. So when it comes to figuring out, from kind of a business perspective, should we really think about using this or not? Maybe you see something on Twitter, you see a new paper published, or you hear about a new case study or something like that, and you're considering, do we want to use it or not? There's a series of steps that are pretty important for people who want to make those strategic decisions, and this might be interesting for some of you guys who are managing teams or just thinking about the future of AI in your own business. Sort of 4 things that are pretty quick. It's really only 3 steps that would involve work. One of which is having an understanding of the kinds of problems that AI and machine learning can solve. So as I mentioned, people hire these teams of very smart people, and then they don't get handed the right kind of work because nobody knows what problems can these guys solve. So having a solid grounding on, what could I do with AI is really, really important. And there's a couple very good articles that'll give you a concise view of that. We've written some, in fact, in the resources in the back of this presentation, I've got some of them that I think are really good. Harvard Business Review, some of our stuff. So if you want the slides, I recommend just getting there. There's a couple really good spaces where you can actually think, especially you guys starting off already as technical folks, where you can think kind of above 80% of most people that are reading that tweet. You're going to have a better idea by reading maybe 2 or 3 pieces. So some understanding of what AI is actually capable of. And then secondly, considering how that maps on top of the priorities in your own business. Almost every business has certain things they have to be the best at, certain goals that they have to reach, and really that's priority. There's certain pillars that are gonna uphold our damn business, and there's other stuff that's ancillary. And a lot of the time, what AI is capable of and what's actually important long ball, our pillars, what matters for us in terms of winning in the market, there's maybe only a couple areas where those really mesh, and where I could say, okay, well, I could see that potentially working for us. So it ends up not being every tweet is potentially relevant for our business, but it's what are the pillars of differentiation and real business advantage? What is AI capable of? And currently, at the current state of affairs, there might be 1, there might be 3 things that maybe we could consider. That helps to filter a lot of stuff out. Because now you're not thinking, if you assess things accurately, maybe you can actually just let go of all these customer service tweets about AI because you just know it's not going to be what drives you. It's not going to be worth the major investment. It's going to be one of the core things in the business. So what does AI do? Mapping that on top of business priorities and the real pillars of somebody's company, where they're headed, that's going to limit us to only a certain number of domain spheres where I should really care. I should even frickin' read it. Take the damn time to read it. Only where those 2 overlay. Lastly, talking to companies who've developed or implemented similar solutions. So before making that leap into hiring more ML folks or working with that vendor company, finding somebody, maybe a competitor, maybe somebody similar, who's integrated something similar, who's done that kind of email filtering thing for customer service, who's done that kind of recommendation thing in e-commerce. Again, maybe not a direct competitor, but someone who's done something quite comparable, and get a sense of what kind of resources do that involve? What do you guys have to change about the way you organize your data? Who do you have to hire to make that happen? And most of the time, much of what they'll say is actually going to be new, novel, useful, because it's not like building whatever other IT things we've done for the last 5 years. There's usually a whole bunch of new novelties there. So if these overlap and you've got a sphere that's interesting, and you actually find something within that sphere. So these 2 things alone will filter out a ton of garbage for companies. If you find a really nice overlap and something that is damn well worth considering for your business, have a couple conversations at the level of business leaders or technical teams who've implemented similar stuff and get a sense of it. You might know right away, hell no, like I don't want to do that. Or you might know, you know what? that could be maybe a Q3, Q4 thing for us to start if we can get our data up to where it needs to be. And you can actually think intelligently about it. Going through these steps is going to help take that Twitter stream of a bajillion crazy, wacky, hyped up AI things and turn it into a few things that are worth considering and that you might be able to consider for your own business. And hopefully that ends up being useful for you guys. It took us a long time to kind of distill what's an easy way to explain this, but again, hopefully this helps train your antennae to dump the 95% of stuff that's garbage and help you guys move forward with your exciting companies. So that's pretty much all I got. That's my email address, and thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Cool.
Danielle, we still have 15 minutes.
Oh, sure.
You skipped the misconceptions. Maybe we can go through that if you have time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sure, man. So this is another similar research poll that we did with PhDs. So this was with 30 different folks who have PhDs in AI or machine learning, and we asked them, what are the most common misconceptions of business people? So business leaders are talking to you fancy AI people, and you see them have a lot of wrong ideas. What are those biggest wrong ideas? And we didn't actually give them options to choose from. We just said, say it how you want to say it. And so they just gave us open-ended text, and then we had to kind of categorize them backwards. And the biggest things that were commonly misconceived by business leaders, number one was kind of the wrong expectations of the capabilities of what AI can do. Usually, we could totally automate this, or we could totally set up a recommender for that. Kind of, again, as I mentioned before, not having an understanding of the kinds of problems AI solves and what it takes to solve them, which isn't rocket science, but most people just don't have any of that. So that's a really, really big misconception. Not having the resources or staff, not having the right data, not having the right team, that's everybody's problem. Almost nobody has the data that they wish they had. Almost nobody has all the ML talent they wish they had. And sometimes it's to a point where it's really not even worth considering applying AI at this point because we're lacking those resources. And then some technical misunderstandings, the tech teams. What kind of languages do we know? What kind of stuff have we built in the past? That kind of stuff. So these are sort of where business folks kind of don't get what they should be maybe understanding of AI, at least when we talk to PhD folks. So that's that slide. Anything else? Yeah, sure.
So, based on your research, take any industry like finance, for example, where they successfully apply some of the problems. So, do you also do a study how they have done it, a specific way of doing it, in what steps, in terms of hiring or in terms of getting consultants, what works?
Yes. Okay. So to repeat the question, because I don't think a lot of you guys heard that. So the question was, when you do see a successful implementation of AI, can you say, who did they work with? How did they integrate it? What did that look like? The answer is yes, and it's heavy lifting. Raghav, who's here with me, who's our content lead at Techemergence, he's in the back there. He has much nicer hair than I do. Raghav, he and I have had many conversations about this, and we've written a number of these case studies together, and he'll tell you as well, it's quite heavy lifting. So one of the things that we have on techemergence.com is a case study section. So techemergence.com/case-studies is a bunch of case studies of machine learning applied to marketing, applied to like natural language processing, all kinds of things like that. And we do go into detail about what did that integration require. You're not always going to get data on like, how much total did it cost? And you're not always going to get that, but some kind of quantifiable result and some kind of deeper insight into what did it take to get it to work. So we do that heavy lifting. I will let you know though, that's not super available on the internet stuff. I wish it was. I wish I could just scrape the damn web and put up 1 million of them, but it's not. So if you download a case study from one of these machine learning vendors, what you're going to see is the same thing over and over. And Raghav and I, we're finding the best way to wrestle with this. You're never going to get detail about the integration, right? Push a button and you can automate. Push a button, you'll make more money with your, right? All the vendors, they write case studies for marketing reasons. It's not immoral. It's just their reason. But that's bad because they don't tell you how damn hard it is to get this stuff to work. The second thing is results are often pretty vague. 7% higher click-through from this client. Okay. Was that for the video things you guys were applying? Was that just in that section, or was that on like the homepage, or was that across? Right. So our job, Raghav and I, we have to balance being polite with like, beating people up to get these details and figure out who had to work with you, how many people on these different teams had to work with you to make this work, how long did it take to get this integration to go, and what the hell do you mean by 7%? Now, we don't say what the hell, but generally, most of the time I don't yell at them. I find it doesn't work. But yes, so to answer your question, techemergence.com/case-studies, we go into that detail. We make that pretty succinct, but I will tell you it is a wrestling match to get that information out of these vendors because they want to keep it behind the curtain. Anything else? Yes, sir. Is there a microphone for this man?
Yeah, so do you feel AI will take away our jobs? All of us will become jobless. What's your take on that? Because we keep reading that news all the time, all media everywhere.
We write a lot on this, and so you're a developer? So my answer to your question is going to change depending on what
I'm
you do.
a cloud architect.
What?
Cloud architect.
Okay, got it. So my most recent TEDx talk is on sort of the simplest framework for thinking about like how easily automated is my stuff. We think a ton about this, and we interview a lot of people that study this specifically. Short answer as a cloud architect, I mean probably not. The biggest thing is like if you're always learning the latest languages and finding a way to really be super valuable for your team, I don't think developers are going to go away anytime soon. A lot of what Raghav and I have done is we've traveled around Bangalore and also had calls with people from Niti Aayog and the AI task force here in India, and a lot of these folks in government is asked. It is a valuable question because the services industry here, a lot of the time is relatively high skill but somewhat repetitive stuff. And that there is actually some pretty serious concerns about automation just in India broadly. But there's also some cool strategies around how India could lead that wave and maybe not be victim to it, but be the ones who kind of push it forward and bring it up a level in value. We hear actually more of that than the opposite. So yeah, for you specifically and you guys in the room, I'm feeling pretty good. We're writing this big piece on AI in India. And there's actually going to be a lot about how India can take advantage of this wave instead of, fearing automation, just like charging ahead and owning it. And I personally, I'm rooting for that. So hopefully that's useful. Yes, sir. What is that?
Failure use cases. Sometimes, as you very well pointed out, you bring something in AI and it was not successful, right? What are the failure cases? Are there any failure cases coming out of AI?
Yeah.
Innovation always experiments means failures, right?
Totally.
Do you have failures too, rather than successes? I don't want success, by the way. Failures I love.
Yes, yeah. So great point. The question was, I don't know if the mic was on there. The question was, do you also are there failures in this space? Can you cover failures? So I wish it was just as easy to go to vendor companies and be like, show me deals that you closed where you sucked. Because usually they don't want to like publicize that a lot. We try to really hard to get to the meat, but like it's very hard for us to dig up stuff that will almost overtly damage somebody. So we don't cover failure cases. Probably also because it would just ruin our relationship with vendors. Like we have like thousands of companies that think we're pretty nice and we're pretty credible, and they like if we just like cover it every time they failed, like wow, that'd be horrible. So hard to get that info. But what we do cover is broadly speaking, talking to industry experts in whatever the field is. So let's say it's the customer service function or chat or something, or let's say it's drug development. We'll talk to those experts and say, what have you tried? And maybe what has worked, what have you struggled with? And so we try to pull that out from more the business buyers than we do from the vendors. Vendors aren't going to tell us that. So we find proxies. But to answer your question, yeah, most things probably fail. No doubt about it. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Is the issue with the AI project failures is because of applying AI, or is it the infrastructure which is provided in the form of AWS services? That itself is not mature enough.
Can you repeat the question real quick?
Yeah. See, in order to apply AI, either you develop everything from scratch and then build an application. That is one approach.
Yep. Okay.
Other approach,
or AWS, yeah.
AWS is giving you certain abstractions. Microsoft is giving you a lot of abstractions. Are they mature enough, or is it the application space where the failure is more?
Yeah, great question. A little bit more technical than I have hands-on experience with, but I can tell you from speaking to a lot of businesses what I see. So we find it's more common, maybe this is obvious, it's more common that it'll be built entirely in-house at really large existing businesses, but almost everybody in the startup space is just using Amazon and Microsoft and other people's tools. So I really feel like there's going to be companies built off the backs of that stuff, and generally people are pretty excited about it, right? We're still feeling out what Amazon can help us do, what Microsoft can help us do, but the newer companies, certainly where I am, Silicon Valley, they're like, that's number one. Like they're going right to that a lot of the time. So we see a lot of younger companies, and I think many of them are going to get huge, built right off the back of that stuff. So it's mature enough for that. Does that mean it's necessarily the fit for big existing businesses? We see a lot more of them starting from scratch. I don't really know. But just, I can speak only from my level and my level of technical expertise. Big, stodgy existing companies often are going to build it from scratch. Literally everybody where I am is just, they're like immediately going to Amazon most of the time.
Yeah, is there any area which you feel, there have been a lot of, which is the area where there have been maximum amount of successes for AI?
So there's a lot of ways I could answer that question. We could talk about that from an industry standpoint, like a sector, a vertical, or we could talk about that from a business function standpoint, that is like a horizontal, like something like marketing, for example, is not limited to one field. Are you talking about a vertical or a general horizontal function?
Vertical is what I was thinking of.
Vertical? Yeah. In terms of like, maybe not, it hasn't raised the most money, but what I can say is the space that I think has the most, how do I say, like per company has the highest amount of ML use. It's not the biggest field, is kind of in like the media / e-commerce space. This is my own anecdotal observation, but in the domain of media and e-commerce, everything is already instrumented, and none of these companies are super effing old. Like they're all like pretty new, and so they're hip with data. They're like their developers are all like really strong. Their company was built tech first, right? It wasn't like IBM was like punch cards and stuff. And I got tons of respect for IBM, but I'm talking like these are businesses. If you're in media or you're in e-commerce, like tech and data are like totally what you breathe. It's in the DNA of the company, right? We don't add it to the DNA later when we realize that's important. It was baked in already. And the companies are only 5 or 10 years old. And everything in the media and e-commerce space is instrumented. That is to say, it's not that hard to find out like if I run a restaurant, like Jesus, how do I find like who does what, who clicks what, who buys what? Like good luck. Like God bless the people working in the restaurant field. I so would never work in that space. No offense to that world. But like e-commerce and media, everything is there. Like we know who these users are. We generally speaking, things are set up so that it's really transparent. And so doing things like recommendations, like customer service, like marketing and reaching out with email based on what they do on site. Everything is contained in a space where whatever we want to grab for data is often there. And so that's not the biggest sector. Like I'm not saying e-commerce is bigger than healthcare, but I'm saying per company, per organization, the richest, highest density of AI use cases in any space. I really see it more there than anywhere, and I think we're going to see that continue to play out personally. So.
Yeah. At this point in time, this question seems hypothetical. So whom are you with, as in the Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk? We know about the conversation, right?
What'd you say?
Elon Musk. Which team you belong to, Zuckerberg or Elon Musk?
Oh yeah, nice. All right, sweet. This is great. Fuck yeah. All right. So, sorry, I swore. So, you're talking about the long ball AI stuff? You guys are all roughly where these guys are. So Zuckerberg is like, AI is really safe, and I'm kind of like going to be the richest dude in the world really soon, and you should all stay calm because like I want to maintain my power. And Musk is like, damn, I'm older than Zuckerberg, and like he's richer than me, and like AI's bad, and like we should be afraid of those guys. We should regulate them because like my prominence needs to be higher than theirs. So at that level, everything is about auctoritas, the height of the power of these individuals, right? Like you don't, like when you're Zuckerberg, like your number one thing isn't like what I want to do on the weekend. Like it's like, how firmly your stamp will be made for eternity. These are the preeminent concerns of persons at that scale. And so we have to think about their opinions from that lens. It's really, really important to think about it from that lens. What we shouldn't think is that Zuckerberg actually thinks AI is inherently safer than Musk. What we should think is that it behooves Musk's auctoritas to make people fear Google and Facebook, who are currently outstripping him in AI talent. Look, he's got OpenAI, he's got Tesla. I'm not saying he's got nothing, but he's got nothing compared to Zuckerberg. He's got nothing compared to Larry Page in terms of AI muscle. Right? If they cruise into AGI in 10 or 15 years, where's his auctoritas? He's no longer the greatest man. Right? He's no longer the greatest man. And so it behooves him to channel more fear, and if you're leading the pack, it behooves you to chill out on the fear. So more than being on an individual team, I just have you understand that those aren't the opinions of those people. Those are the tools to proliferate the auctoritas of those people. You read the biography of Napoleon, for example. You don't take what Napoleon says to people as what he thinks. You take this as what he believes is most likely to expand his empire. And so look through it through that lens. Long enough ball. So for that reason, I'm in neither camp, because they're not expressing their opinions. They're expressing the proliferation of their power. But long enough ball, I do believe there's mega serious concern about the future of artificial intelligence like 20, 30 years from now. I really think there's like reasonably likely extinction stuff. So anyway, yeah.
Hi, this side. So when I go through or when I search for AI or ML, I see three things. One is you need a PhD in mathematics, or you need to go through TensorFlow or some tool, or there are 100,000 online courses which say, we are best, we could make you a brilliant AI ML person. Yeah. So what are your views on it? As a developer, let's say a person who comes to me asking, I want to do something in AI or ML, what would be the way forward?
Yeah, so like the upskilling way, like how would I, as a developer, get into AI and ML? So as a non-developer, I have to step back and say, like, if you need me to write code for something, it's going to be pretty ugly. But I hear enough talk from the people who manage these teams. Generally, more to the people that hire and fire developing teams than individual developers. But they're often very technical, especially at the high-tech companies in San Fran. There's some people learning this stuff from scratch. I think probably your best bet, if you want to, I want to be a developer who does AI, damn it. I want to do it. Well, yeah, it definitely helps to go to Carnegie Mellon or Stanford or something. There's no doubt about that, right? It's not like, it's just an overpriced. It's kind of like, shit, no, that really is going to be helpful. However, the next best bet, and I think a lot of these guys know this, is if you can work on really cool cutting-edge projects at a company that gets it. They know the science. They have the best. So they have the guys from Carnegie Mellon, and you can just osmosis them. You just stand next to them with a straw and just suck up everything you can, right? So who's the people that get all the PhDs, and can I just stand next to them for a long enough period of time? And the companies that get all those PhDs are really obvious. It's super obvious who gets all the PhDs. And so the second best thing is osmosis. And so if you can work right next to those guys, you can work on those projects. People realize, certainly in the Valley, and I imagine out here, that if you're right next to really leading edge Carnegie Mellon PhDs and MIT PhDs and whatnot for 5 years on recommendation engines or something else, that's better than school. You got it, buddy. You're all set. So if you want to be a developer that really owns AI skill, going back to school is an option. Getting a scholarship to go to one of the schools that globally will be seen as eminent would not hurt you at all. But probably the more realistic thing is to go work at a company that sucks up those PhDs, be next to them, work your nads off and learn all that you can. And most people who are going to hire you in the future will see that as actually even more important than the degree. Again, I'm not a developer, but that's what I see in the field. Hopefully that's helpful. Cool. Okay. Microphone? Yeah, we don't have you yet.
Two things,
Sure.
How much of the PhDs and others who are working on AI, looking from an emotional intelligence perspective, and value creation for people. As you said very beautifully, Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, like the Napoleon wants to expand his
just think
empire,
about-
they need to
yeah.
expand their empire, right?
Think about them as tyrants,
But the
yeah.
actual people who are doing it. So from a
Sure.
then we didn't talk about emotional intelligence. We have moved to artificial intelligence. So how is the play of emotional intelligence, soft skills, and other things in the whole way of both selling and when you have to conceptualize? For example, someone conceptualize things which actually exploits people, right? So what is the type of development? Is there anything happening in that space? You are doing a market research from a business perspective, from an adoption perspective. For example, in India, you have different schemes which says, hey, you don't have a number, you don't do anything, you don't get food, right? So people have to be educated on all these things. Is there anything happening in these spaces?
Yeah.
Because you said you are not a developer, so I thought this is a question I need to put to you.
Yeah, sure, man. Yeah. So I think you had two sections there. The first one is, where is AI sort of intersecting with emotional intelligence? Is this what you were talking about? So this is one. So maybe I'll try to just tackle that first quickly. There's not that much, to be honest. So if I were to say like, oh yeah, everybody working on AI is really excited and super aware of emotional intelligence stuff, like not really. There's some neat companies. There's a company called Affectiva. There's a company called EYESIS, EYESIS, that are sort of working on like the facial recognition and like sentiment type stuff. There's a lot of like sentiment in NLP, obviously. So, call centers and whatnot, like, are we pissing people off? Are we calming them down? Are we, do they sound grateful at the end of a call? Do they sound right? Picking up on audio and picking up on the transcription, detecting emotion there. So in NLP, customer service / marketing sort of world, we're detecting a lot of that. Is it, now, of course, they want to make their customers happy, but I think what you're talking about is like something much bigger picture. Like, are we like building products inherently aiming to like make people more fulfilled long term? Is that what you were talking about?
For example, for Alzheimer's, some people are trying to do for Alzheimer's, how to use the AI and solve problems in the area, how to make sure they are not lost, they just don't disappear, because they forget everything.
Yeah.
How do they bring back, how do I track them, how do I do it, right? I don't see that much, coming out, right?
Yeah.
Those have a use case. What case come is how I can track you and how I can track and make money out of you, how can I
Yes.
target you.
Totally. So good point. We did an article called on AI for Good. So if you look like AI for Good Tech Emergence, you can see a pretty good stint of stuff in environment and in mental health and other areas that really are kind of not necessarily for-profit applications, but are a pretty wide array, what we think is a somewhat representative array. It's not complete by any means, but of kind of these more altruistic initiatives. But yeah, I mean, most of it is like, what are you clicking on and how do we monetize? And again, that's not because it's built by evil people. I also don't think Zuckerberg and Musk are evil, but I don't want to come across like that. Like I think when you get to a certain level, that's just how you think. End of story. End of story. Like, you get to a certain level and like your actions have massive consequences. You have to think at that kind of, it doesn't mean you're like not human anymore, but it means you just got into, so I don't want to come across like, same thing with business. It's not because they're bad, but these are businesses that have employees to pay, And so if your first thing is like, how happy can we make like some like people or something, and like, by the way, human happiness is like, oh God, like, we're just not good at it, right? Like, oh God, like we're the worst, like we're so bad at like maintaining well-being, like, it's horrible. Like first world suicide, still like such a gargantuan thing. So like that's a very vapid task, but like money's not that vapid, like you can count it. And so the applications are way more on that side. There's some cool philanthropic stuff. We've covered a bit of it, but to be frank, I mean, we should expect the innovation to be where people are getting fed. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying I like it. I'm saying that's definitely what we see, though, for sure. I'm excited about those altruistic applications, and luckily, there's a lot of mentality of people who are in the field who want to be involved in that stuff. They see meaning in that, and there's a lot of this intersection of AI and well-being and ethics that I think is ahead of its time. We're really not there in terms of applications, but there's a lot of excitement. So that should be promised that we'll see more of it, and I certainly hope we do. Fight.
So it's a simple.
I can connect with the gentleman. So we have actually used Effectiva for emotional intelligence.
Oh, cool. Nice.
And it's for Oppenheimer Funds investment company. So it looks like there's a huge scope which is coming up, because let's think about a situation in India. What is happening today? How do you check a person's credibility? If you want to get a credit card, how do institutes do check, right? There is a CIBIL score for all of us, right? And that's how they make it. But, there is a set of scholars who thinks differently. The days are going to go away, where you really need more than your bank statements to check a credibility of a person. So there's we have done a successful project where we have run a pilot with almost 200 peoples. So we've actually, not me, but definitely my company for which I was working, they've actually paid people and they have requested them to come take a survey, and we have collected a lot of data which could be used on emotional intelligence. So it's still in a phase. Pilot one was very successful, and fortunately, unfortunately, the second example that you took up, we are also making a successful game for an Alzheimer patient. So even probably we can offline connect and we can talk about that. But we foresee that there has been a lot of inquiries coming up. Sales, pre-sales, they're chasing us. Hey, boss, let's have some discussion with 4 more, 5 more, 10 more companies on this. So I feel there is great going in that direction at least.
So I'm just curious about all these success stories, right? Do they have a dark side? Because of the use of AI, did the people get cutbacks or something?
Cutbacks. Well, is this a term? So, what's a cutback mean?
So I mean,
oh yeah, okay, where people laid off and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we have to tease out. So great question. Like in these successful applications, we haven't really currently covered many case studies where that's been super prevalent. And even if it were, though, it definitely wouldn't really be talked about. So here's something. So again, this is like a really important lens of thought, and this is super important as an analyst firm. And I think transferring this is like way more important. Like you can look at the case studies and make your decision, but like thinking about it like this is actually the most important thing. Companies that are really people heavy will generally really play down even the possibility of automation. So like Accenture just like pretends like automation is just complete garbage. And by the way, I like and respect Accenture. Paul Doherty, their CTO guy, like I've talked to him on a bunch of occasions. He's actually written content for our website. I've met the man face to face, nice guy. But realistically, if I were in his shoes, I couldn't really talk that much about automation because like I don't want people to get afraid. I can't have people get afraid and like want to leave and go to other places, and I need concord among the people who do our work, and so I don't talk about automation. So often what you have to be careful of is companies that are really small and like super tech savvy may have a tendency to overplay how much is automatable because they don't have like enough auxiliary employees to like kind of spook, and it kind of plays into the hype of AI and gets them attention. People that are really people heavy, big consulting firms will tend to almost talk about automation like it's garbage, but it's neither black or white. Have we covered case studies where it was very clear that people were laid off? I really can't think of any where it seems evident. And I'm not a super pessimist, and I don't think it will. But I do think that both sides are true, and that what's more important than like what you read is understanding the incentives of who's writing it. So Accenture is almost never going to talk about the immediate and dire. It's unlikely, is what I'm saying. So be wary of that. But from what we've seen, actually not that much. We haven't seen that much huge layoffs in marketing, customer service, whatever. So hopefully that answers your question. You're going to read a lot more of this stuff. It'll be really important to be like, how many employees would they scare if they talked about automation? Just think through that, right? If it's like none, then maybe they're hyping it. If it's basically all of them, then they're probably downplaying automation when maybe it actually is a risk. Not black or white.
Hi Daniel. My question is, what kind of use cases have you seen in the verticals like wealth management or investment banking? Are they looking forward to it?
Great question. We're actually thinking about doing something on wealth management. Interestingly enough, so really, I really like a lot of the. So under healthcare, finance is the most traffic that we get. A lot of finance folks. AI and banking, we rank for all these terms. And so, like wealth management, two things I'll mention here. Number one, in that whole space, regulation is obviously really stringent. And so there are some bounds to kind of like what could be done, right? There's a lot of exciting stuff that might be useful that we're just never going to use because it's black box, right? A lot of machine learning stuff is black box. We don't know how to figure out why it came to those conclusions. So that's actually kind of limiting a little bit of what's being done in wealth management and in finance at large. And the other thing that I think there's a lot of talk about, but that I think is really tough to crack, is in the trading, sort of like whether it's day trading or adjusting portfolios and whatnot. There's a lot on what do they call those things? Robo-advisors. So there's a lot there, and I think that there is some credence there because we're dropping costs, and like a lot of what you're paying for is just like these stupid fees, and so that's a good idea. But most people are of the belief it's a good idea to beat the market with ML. There's actually a lot of pretty compelling reasons why that's maybe not even close to being near term possible at any scale. And there's an article called that we did called, if you email me, I'm happy to, Dan at Techemergence. We did a pretty long piece actually by a PhD in Australia about the particular challenges of the stock market and wealth management writ large and ML, and why, like, even if we could go with a black box, why we can't succinctly shake out real advantage from there. So I'm not pessimistic, but I will say regulations and some of the challenges of predicting and beating the stock market, I'm more excited about dropping the costs. I think, like, I'm not saying robo-advisors are the coolest tech, but I think that near term, like, that's kind of what's cool. I wish I could tell you it's possibility, upside, people becoming billionaires, auto trading. Super not right now, from what I've seen.
Yeah, here. So
if it was possible, I also probably wouldn't tell you because I'd just be out there like doing it in the back room or something. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So should we really regulate the AI field? Because if you look at what Cambridge Analytica did recently, and it is a threat to democracy to an extent, what I believe, because AI is something which they show us what they wanted to believe us to believe in. It might be a fake news, it might be some hype news, it might be anything. So should we really, what exactly, particularly with Cambridge Analytica?
Yeah, so on that topic in particular, there's a lot of like talk about like regulating AI broadly and whatnot. My own personal concerns, like the only reason I'm really in this field is because I think I'll probably live through seeing what's after people, like in terms of like intelligent, sentient life, and I think that those decisions will have to involve like global regulation and whatnot. We're nowhere close to that. We're more talking about near term like social media democracy, which I don't mean to downplay, but it's not like what's after people or something. To that point, I think there are discussions around frameworks of how transparency could be built into this stuff. To talk through those frameworks is like really its own science. One thing I will say is likely to be the case is that a lot of these rules that we see in like the EU around like personal data use, I think are somewhat inevitable, and I don't know in what time horizon, going to make their way to the US. Now, one reason to bear in mind why it's slower here than it is, let's say, in France or Germany is because these are American companies, and so like the benefit of just like having all the data, doing whatever we want with it, right? Like that's coming back to the States, and the lobbying for government, like Google and Facebook, like they have like non-consequential amounts of, like they have a lot of money to lobby, right? And they don't really, they're not able to do the same in every damn like Lithuania or something, right? Like whatever, like Lithuania is going to fight them tooth and nail. But they're bringing value back to America in monetary terms, and they can lobby and kind of have a better control over like government affairs in the one country where they're all based. So it's slower to come to America, but I think it's inevitable that will happen. How will AI be regulated? That is probably too abstract, and I don't know if that's going to have any reality to it anytime soon. Personal data and transparency on what people are seeing and interacting with, I think will inch its way into the States, and this Analytica thing I think has made that seem more pressing. I don't have the solution, but I will say I'm quite optimistic that America will get more European, at least with data use.
Yeah, so what's your take on fraud detection and cybersecurity from an AI perspective? Like you have been analyzing market and writing about it.
When you say my take, just to understand what you mean, do you mean like are there any particular cool companies, or is it useful or not useful, or yeah.
Means in general, what's your perspective?
Yeah, in general, I actually think they're really low-hanging fruit applications. Really low-hanging fruit. So anomaly detection, which like security and fraud detection are kind of in that anomalous space, right? Like, is this transaction too much money, or from a weird IP address, or but it goes deeper than that, than just finance, of course. Within a company, anomaly detection is did this person's key code get used in these 2 rooms on the other side of campus than from where this person usually is? And then did they download a file like larger than they normally do right after that? Like being able to flag anomalies, things that you couldn't possibly hard code all the rules for, is really like a bare bones, like, OMG, that's where AI is useful, or ML is useful use case. So, I mean, within 2 or 3 years, it's kind of already the thought, but it will kind of be like very firmly the thought and getting close to the reality that if you're a big enterprise, either your solution is a data security solution is like predicated on machine learning, or you're kind of not doing security. So it will get there, and I think it'll get there soon. I'm very optimistic about machine learning and data security as a relative sector, right? More than like if you point at any other business function, I would say that's a great one. And there's clearly a lot of traction. So anomaly detection is like, we could almost say like, that's the easiest thing for ML to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's definitely an area where there's a ton of existing traction. There's a lot of great companies, fraud as well. And I think hopefully that'll make for like, that's kind of cool for general consumers. Like I think hopefully that will level it up. Of course, there'll be people using AI for the criminal side of things, but I think writ large, data security and fraud for, let's say, credit cards or banking is a great use case, already is right now, great traction right now. So yeah. Yes, sir.
From a venture capitalist or investor point of view, what are the parameters they would think before investing in a startup?
Oh man, I've asked that same question a bajillion times to a bajillion VCs, so I'll tell you. So we did a big piece. For a while, I was doing a Huffington Post column on AI and business, and one of them was the distilled lessons from 12 VC interviews, where we basically asked this question, but to people that, like, I'm not a VC, so I don't actually put huge sums of money into AI companies, but these are people who do, and we essentially asked them the same thing. I'll sum it up very briefly. So AI is in every pitch deck, period. If it's, so like 2 years ago, it was on page 3, now it's on page 1, like AI in whatever your slide deck is if you're trying to raise money, right? VCs are aware that a lot of that is nonsense. What they're excited about is companies that have, and there's an interview we did with a guy named Ben Narrison at Canvas Ventures in the Bay Area, who talked about a proprietary data plume. So he just happened to have the best word for it, but a lot of other people said it. Proprietary data plume, what do I mean? A business that has access to a growing, swelling base of information that's business valuable and only they have. And that's only swelling and expanding. These are the people who have the data fuel to build a wider and wider moat where nobody's going to catch up with them, right? How are you going to make a general search engine better than Google? You're just never going to, right? They get so many searches, they own that plume of data to such a high degree that you can't fight them at that level. Same thing with recommendations and every product at Amazon, right? There's people like Wayfair that are trying to compete in furniture or compete in some little niche, but broad scope. I mean, you're just not catching up. It's that boat is already sailed. It's over. So VCs want to see an expanding moat. I'll give you one example, and then we can move on. I was almost certain I would have been kicked off stage like 10 minutes ago. So if it check me at any point, just boot me. I'm a pretty light guy. I'll go flying. So I'll just answer this question. One example, for example, there's a business called Inside Sales. So Inside Sales is, to make it brief, they're a dashboard to kind of prompt salespeople to make a next step, send an email, do a phone call, whatever, right? If Inside Sales, and they learn from the actual closing, so they figure out what happened at that appointment, did we close a deal, what was the value of that deal, that kind of stuff, all this is tracked inside of Inside Sales. So if Inside Sales can work with, let's say, 50,000 car dealerships, or let's say even just 1,000 car dealerships, they might get to a point where if you're a car dealership with no data, you're just a small dealership, you plug them in, they already know kind of the best, given your geo region, given your kinds of customer, given your make and model of cars that you sell, they might know the best kinds of marketing, the best follow-up, the best cadence, the best actions for you to take right away, right out of the box, because they've already collected it from car dealerships. And if they do that with all car dealerships, nobody could probably, like I'm going to plug in Inside Sales and make immediate amounts of money, and nobody else is going to be able to give me that. And so if they can own enough of that plume of data in SaaS, in cars, in mortgage sales, whatever the hell sales function we're talking about, then they can have such a plume that no one's going to cross the moat. If you're selling in that space, you're using inside sales and screw everybody else. We know it's like trying to use Bing, right? It's just garbage. So everybody wants an impenetrable moat that's swelling based on a proprietary set of data. So what do VCs want? That's what they want. That's